Well, I'm back in the country. Where are you? I hope you are somewhere ready where you can listen. Let's count it in.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And now, here's your host.
And it is a huge welcome to you all to episode 63 of The Reasonable Adventurer. I'm Colin Jones. I'm about to turn 50, but that'll be next week's show, I think. We might tune in on what that actually could mean. But it does have me thinking every now and again, in between my concentration on my work, what does it actually mean? What does it actually mean when you reach 50? I remember turning 30, thinking to myself, I'm a third of the way there. I'm not so sure I'm that optimistic that I'm half the way there now. So anyway, we'll talk more about that later. But it's got me thinking about the challenges of information. I keep looking back at people who are much younger than I am and how they interact with the internet. Better than me, worse than me. And I find this whole process very interesting. And I wonder where you're at with this in terms of what you were doing with the internet 10 years ago compared to what you do with it now. Has that changed in your life? Do you think you actually are connected? Do you want to be connected? I suppose is another question that's worth asking. But we're not going to worry too much about that question today. I'm more interested in that actual process. Can you remember back to when there was no internet? Assuming you're old enough to be able to remember that. I most probably wasn't at a huge period of or a stage in my life when I needed to get lots of information that I didn't know. So I could find most things out by asking friends, reading the paper. But I do remember the first day I had the internet connected. I just bought my first computer. It was a work computer. And my accountant put the internet on for me. I didn't actually have any idea what he was doing. I couldn't see the value in it because if I wanted to search for something, it was going to take like 10 minutes for the little spider to crawl across the screen. Do you remember that little spider, the little web crawler? Anyway, eventually it all started to make sense, and email seemed to be the most common thing that tied us to the internet. It was the thing that it was better than fax machine, and I was thinking on the way back from England, just how amazing the internet is. I was 38,000 feet in the sky. I was wondering about my football team, and the Emirates plane I was on actually had that facility. You can just log onto the Wi-Fi signal on the plane, and you can pick up stuff. And I thought to myself, I know, I've got a good mate of mine, Barry, he's a technician, tells me that when I speak to somebody on the other side of the planet, whether it's a phone call or Skype or whatever it might be, just everything, the data that I'm contributing gets broken down into zeros and ones and sent back down the line and then reassembled at the other end and put back together. And I still find it hard to actually get my head around how that happens, because if I'm talking to someone at the other end and I'm seeing their face exactly as their face is and exactly as their voice is, I just think that's amazing. But what I think is even more amazing is when someone takes a really cool picture and they send it, and 1 or 2 seconds later, it's been broken into zeros and ones, sent down the line, reassembled from the ones and zeros back into an image, and there it is. And I think to myself, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? A video, even short video. Anyway, the sad end of this story, of course, is that when I finally did get logged on, and I was able to check on my football team, hoping that they were going to turn their poor form around. No. So I then had another 14 hours of the flight to go, or thereabouts, where I had to actually contemplate the fact that they were going to lose. It would have been better off sticking with the selection of movies and bits and pieces. Anyway, I digress. So, have you got your head around that? What you were doing when you had the internet first put on? How did you access it? Was it your computer? Was it something else? I'm just looking at this article which is talking about 10 good things to do on the internet. And it's really interesting because this article was published 10 years ago. And so it's interesting to compare that with what people are thinking about today. So we've got, number one, easy tool to communicate, all right? So we can it says here, almost free of charge. It's interesting, almost free of charge. It pretty much is free of charge. You can imagine there wasn't a lot of Wi-Fi written when that was actually put in that space. Personal identity, for being able to have your own online identity, such as your own email address or your own web space. I think we've gone a fair way beyond that, haven't we? Control. You're in a position to control what you see, when you see it, and for how long you see it. That's interesting, isn't it? Because there's obviously a comparison to the TV as being the main medium that we would actually interact with. And we now have Netflix and other such things where we can actually decide when we'll view, where we'll view. It's amazing how many people are watching the internet on the train, of a morning. Entertainment, clearly, because you can send around funny emails. So that's sort of like the extent of the entertainment here. Funny emails and cracking jokes. You can make informed purchasing decisions. This is a really cool one, isn't it? Because we're not talking about buying online here in 2006. We're talking about being able to get all that background information so that we can make a better purchase offline. Always get the latest information in relation to news. Business support, being able to get up-to-date information on particular topics like HR or whatever the case may be. Saving money, being able to buy things maybe from a fraction of the cost. Saving time and effort, so thinking about e-banking, e-government services, and getting access to some of the best websites. Well, I think that one's pretty obvious. So that was like a top 10 for 2006. I find that quite interesting. And it reminds me of a great piece of research done many years ago by a guy called Jenks back in the 1940s. And he thought about the rise and impact of the railway system in America. And he said, well, first and foremost, it was just an idea. And people could speculate and make money about the speculation of this idea, investors. Then it actually became a project. So now people are actually making money putting down the train lines, building the trains themselves. And that obviously went on for many, many years. And then eventually it hit the third stage where it became that actual process that was used to transport things. So it went through these three very distinct stages. It was an idea that captured people's imaginations. It was something that was created and created lots of jobs along the way. And then it became a medium of transport. I've made the same argument elsewhere in the past that we actually have the same process for the internet. Originally, it was just an idea. I'm not talking about the internet as a Defence Force initiative of America. I'm talking about, its commercialization, back in the early 90s. I'm talking about that type of commercialization. And it really had the same impact, the same process. There were lots of people speculating, buying up domain names, investing in would-be startups. So people were trying to speculate on the idea. Even though there may not have been any substance to the idea, people wanted to get in first. They didn't want to miss out. Then it became an entire industry, which it is still to some effect today, where people are involved in actually providing services and building things. You mentioned 10 years ago how many people were knocking on businesses' door. We would like to build you an internet, site and the like. And then, of course, it's now slipped straight into that process where it is the medium of communication, of commerce, of a whole range of factors, even moving towards currency now with bitcoins and other such things. So when I look at the 2006, just when I type into Google top 10 things on the internet, some things have changed. So number one has stayed the same, checking emails. That seems to be something we all get up and do every morning, and many of us during the evening. Number two, though, is downloaded. It's hard to find who has not downloaded music and movies. So that one didn't appear in the previous one. The whole process of downloading music and DVDs wasn't really something we were doing 10 years ago. It doesn't seem like a long time ago. And our kids most probably can't even believe that we weren't downloading music. But think about it. When did you get your first iPod? It wasn't before 2006. It's interesting, isn't it? all of this change, all these smartphones, they weren't there 10 years ago, but they're there now. Look at the impact. Can you remember the PDA? Did anyone out there have a PDA, personal digital device? Is that what they're called? I forget what they're called now. But anyway, you'd look like an idiot if you're walking up the street now with a PDA, wouldn't you? The search for relevant information, that most probably stays the same. Booking tickets. That wasn't on the previous one. Booking tickets. Shopping online explicitly. That wasn't there because we weren't talking about eBay. We weren't talking about Amazon. Even though Amazon was there, it was still trying to find its feet. Making friends. Isn't that an interesting one? Making friends. We weren't talking about that 10 years ago. Socialising. I definitely relate to this one more now. Even though I've got a lot of friends around the world and I use Facebook and other such things to stay in touch with those guys, I do find now that I'm living in Brisbane and I have family still in Hobart and other friends there, that Facebook is a fantastic way of just being able to keep in touch with someone once a week, just keeping that contact actually going. The e-banking, well, I think that's coming right to the fore now, hasn't it? And the last one that's on here I think is a really cool one. And it really sort of taps into our show and our theme in terms of being able to create those opportunities for satisfaction. And that is the online freelancer. It says here, internet has also created opportunities for people who are interested in working online as freelancers, be it writing, web designing, e-commerce or entrepreneurship. Now it is possible for everyone to show off his or her talents and make a living out of it. Millions of freelancers make their living online, and this number is increasing substantially every year. And we've talked about this before in past shows, and I really do think that this is the future. I really think that everybody with a job needs to be developing a career. Did you hear what I said then? Everybody needs to be developing a career online, especially if you have a job. Doesn't make any sense, does it? If you've got a job, why do you need to develop a career? Just think about how much change has actually occurred in the last 10 years. It's staggering to think how the internet has changed our lives in just 10 years. And the 5 years before that, when we were running around trying to work out what it was and we were waiting for bandwidths to sort of catch up. So all the cool things that people said we could do, we would actually get to eventually do. But we're there now. We're all streaming things. We've all got 1,000 gigabytes of data every month that we're using, and we're streaming this and we're streaming that, and we're taking control of what we want to watch and when we want to watch it. We're doing all of those things now. But at the same time, the internet is shaping the way the world is being organised. And you'd have to be incredibly naive to think that almost any type of job, work, occupation isn't going to still be even further shaped by the advent of the internet. Now, it's not all gloom and doom. I think there are lots of industries which are broadening in terms of the potential consumer base that can be reached as a result of the internet. I think my litmus test on all of this is, when can I buy a pair of Levi's online from America? I think that'll be the day when consumers will celebrate in the morning and commiserate in the afternoon, because that's going to happen at some point. But when that happens, it also means that all of those jobs that relate to the importation, the warehousing, the distribution, the marketing, the sale of all of those goods, which currently have all those distribution channels set up right across the world, will start to collapse. And we'll see that sort of fabled disintermediation warning threat that was sort of out there in the early 2000s, saying all the middle people are all going to disappear. They're going to be sucked into this vacuum. That has happened in some industries. There's no doubt about that. But when you actually think it through, by and large, our shopping experience can still be the same. And yet the internet threatens to make it entirely different. It threatens to make education entirely different. It's making so many things entirely different. And it's for that reason that everybody with a job should be thinking about how might they develop a second career in it with their own online presence, so that, one, they understand how that world works, two, they actually develop a brand, they develop a bit of a sense of it. We all know something, we've talked about it before, we all know something that other people are interested in. It could be just their imaginations and their ability to tell stories. It could be how to do things, certain processes. But the reality is we all know something. Now the challenge is, do we take the frog in the fry pan approach where we just sort of say, it's all right, I'm just going to ignore that. And the water gets so warm, all of a sudden we want to get out and we're all cooked. There's nothing to move. Or do we just accept it is changing? I can see just in the last 10 years just how radically it's changed. How we've moved from being observers of the internet to now being full-on users of the internet. There is no turning back. It will just keep moving forward. Capitalism sort of almost guarantees that organisations will structure themselves and organise the very way they do business to ensure that they actually are profitable. Unfortunately, that means that all of that slack that we have in the system, which provides so many jobs throughout the globe, at some point will disappear, much of it. Now, will that be in 2 years' time, 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 100 years' time? No one actually knows. But we can see the changes it's made to certain industries. The news. How easy is it to get a job as a journalist with an office, sitting downtown and going out and getting the occasional story, and being given the luxury to write about stories you're passionate about? How easy is that to get now? It's not. But there still is work there for journalists. But it's work that's being done in a different way. We still need, in fact, you could argue we need more content now because we don't want to watch the same news. If I look at an online news site in the morning, if I go back to it in the afternoon, I'm going back not because I want to catch up on the news I didn't read in the morning, because I want to see what the new news is. You know, the stuff that happened just before lunch and just after lunch. So we've got more and more content, right? So there's a challenge for you. In terms of being able to create your own opportunities for satisfaction, how connected are you to the internet? So I'm not asking you, do you have an email account? I'm not asking you, do you have the internet connected to your house? I'm asking you, to what extent are you connected to the internet in such a way that you can create value that relates to your own personal interests and abilities and can potentially act as a safeguard and or a contributor to your retirement? For my mind, we can either keep consuming it, coming home from work and just sitting in front of something, a screen, and consuming stuff, or we can become creators of stuff. Let's do the second. Let's become creators. Let's create those opportunities for satisfaction by getting on. We've never had an easier opportunity to actually find the resources to actually do anything in this world. You only got to go to Kindle. If there's something that you think you'd like to do, you only got to go to Kindle and look for a book. There'll be someone already written a book on how to do it. Buy a few of those books because they only cost a couple of bucks. Find the good bits and start to make a little plan for how you can develop your own presence, a presence that you could actually earn income from, a presence which might be simply just paying for your holidays once a year, or it might actually provide you with a parachute in the event that the internet changes your particular area of work more than you may have expected to. Something for you to reflect upon. Until we talk again, cheerio. I look forward to celebrating my birthday with you next week. And in fact, it is my birthday on the day the show comes out. Cheerio.